Okay, we're going to talk about qualitative research, and this is an introduction video. So qualitative research, this is kind of a textbook definition, but it is systematic investigation of social phenomena using textual information. Let's go into that a little bit. So at the beginning of the semester, we talked about quantitative versus qualitative research. We made the distinction, but let's make it one more. So quantitative, an example of a quantitative question is this: what is the association between parent-child communication and adolescent self-esteem? So that word association is generally referring to regression or correlation, which are quantitative methods are based upon numbers. Down here is a qualitative question. How can we understand how parents contribute to adolescents' well-being? So that question is much more exploratory. It's a lot more open-ended. Yeah. So here's some main differences. So qualitative research is often inductive, while qualitative is often inductive, while quantitative is often deductive. In quantitative, a lot of times we're testing hypotheses, but in qualitative, a lot of times there aren't hypotheses, though there are exceptions. Rather, you're identifying themes to come up with a theory. So you're looking for depth more than breadth. So a lot of times in qualitative research, the setting is natural, but in quantitative, it is often experimental or laboratory, although that's not always true. Sampling, we'll go into sampling for qualitative research more later, but for sampling in quantitative, ideally it's randomized and generalizable. So qualitative research data is text, quantitative it is numbers. So when I say text, I'm talking words or photos, things like that. So then qualitative research is the analysis is iterative, identifying themes. And when I say iterative, I mean that it's repetitive in that you go over the interviews or the data multiple times, looking for these themes. But in quantitative, you use statistical models to analyze. So there are four broad types of qualitative research. You have interviews, exploring individuals' experiences and perceptions in rich detail. You have focus groups, exploring social norms and shared experiences. Observations, explore behaviors and interactions in natural setting. And then documents and or media, explore patterns of communication. Okay, so when you're developing a qualitative research question, they are very exploratory, and so here's some guidelines that should be followed when coming up with a qualitative research question. The question must be non-directional, inductive, very precise as to the topic and population, and focused in its purpose. It helps to state it using a verb: characterize, describe, understand, when you're coming up with your question. So interviewing can be thought of as a guided conversation, guided by a set of open-ended questions, using a semi-structured script called a framework. So some advantages to qualitative research is it richly describes individual perspectives and experiences. It can address sensitive topics, and you can come up with theoretical generalizability, which is kind of the idea that that you were able to come up with a theory. But some disadvantages are that it's not generalized. The sample is generally not generalizable to other people or situations, and is very time-consuming and tedious to do qualitative research.